I can hear you. I did turn it off. I'm hoping to have some eggplant for you sometime soon, but that's like rabbits and everything. One of the rabbits was trying to dig a burrow under an eggplant. So anyway, I'm gonna turn my mic off again. Okay, but they can see me. Okay. Okay, I'm going to turn my microphone off so that doesn't happen. Okay.
You're gonna dig this.
Hey guys, welcome to this is week 6 of the language learning series. If you're in the chat room already, say hello, tell me where you're from and what you're doing here. This is going to be a slightly different live stream because we have a special guest. We'll be talking about improving your pronunciation in your target language, and I have colleague and a friend who teaches or has taught courses in pronunciation, so she's kind of an expert. We've talked a lot about things like that, like things to do to improve your pronunciation. So I thought she'd be a great contribution to the live stream. Hi, Allison. Welcome back, Allison. It's always nice to see your face here. Hi, Sylvia. Welcome back. Good to see familiar faces. It's always a good sign when you have return customers. Okay, I'll keep it brief because I want to give Mary as much time as possible. I have the usual announcements. The channel is doing very well. I've been working on the second channel for English language learners. Actually, I posted a video last night. It was kind of fun to create that video. So if you have a chance, check out Snap Language Learner. The new video is about using so, very, and to in English that even native speakers sometimes use one or another word incorrectly. While I'm chatting with Mary, I'll be checking the chat room. So if you have any questions, let me know. I will make sure that either I answer the question or Mary answers the question. Just a reminder, remember that you can support Snap Language. Let me flash this up here with super chats and super stickers. They're really appreciated. I'm trying to make this hopefully my job, not just a second job, and I really need your support. YouTube there's a lull during the summer. Not many people are watching videos. I'm not sure why. So your income kind of drops a bit. So I'm very, very appreciative of people that send super chats. When you send a super chat, you're noticed. I make sure to answer your question. You get a little shout out and all that. And also remember that for some time now, we have a membership, channel memberships. Just click the join button on the channel. I think even under your chat box, you have a join button there, I believe. Take a look at the perks. It really helps a lot. It's a way for you to show your support. You're telling me that you support my work, and you get some perks. Some people actually do it just for the support. They just want to support the channel, which I think is really, really cool. So I will not spend much more time talking about this. Let's see, there you go. I'm going to skip right into a very, very, very brief presentation before I bring Mary on. So what are we doing today? I'm going to give you some quick tips on pronunciation, and then we'll bring our guest, Mary, who will, maybe disagree with me, maybe add information. I'm sure she will add a lot of information. As usual, we're not going to offer any snake oil, no quick fixes, no one size fits all. Each individual has different needs, educational needs. As far as pronunciation is concerned, you all come from different countries, you have different native languages, so your needs are different. However, we will try to guide you as to what you can do to improve your pronunciation if that's one of your goals. And we'll be very real about it. Remember, sometimes we'll be saying things like L1. L1 is your native language or your mother tongue. L2 or your target language. That's whatever language you're learning. I know many of you are here because you're English language learners, but we also have some people that are learning Arabic and French and German and what have you. Always keep in mind that your learning context makes a big difference. So we may say something that would apply to someone living in the country where the language is spoken. If you're not, then, just take as much information as is useful to you, and we'll make sure that we address all different contexts. Roxana, welcome. Welcome back. Happy Saturday. Roxana is one of our channel members. She was actually one of the first channel members. I really appreciate Roxana's support. She's been coming to all live streams, and she participates in she watches the bonus materials for members, and she leaves comments and questions. That's really cool. I appreciate it, Roxana. Fernando Quirino, hi, welcome. I don't remember seeing you. Welcome. It's always good to see new faces too. Okay, so the first thing that I want to talk about really quickly, we started talking about it in the previous session last Saturday, is about phonological awareness. A lot of times when you're learning a new language, you just hear all these sounds and you can't really make sense of them. One thing that when I teach English, I try to show students that these are the sounds of English. Okay, so this may not make any sense to you whatsoever because it uses the IPA, the International Phonetic Alphabet. If you have a good dictionary, they will use these symbols in it. Okay. These are all the possible vowels in any language. English does not use all of them. So, for example, this is the E sound in English. There's a difference in English between saying, for example, beat and bit. And when I'm teaching, students get confused. They don't know if it's beat or bit or bet. So I explain to them approximately how or what you do with your tongue. When you say E, you kind of spread your lips. Your tongue is in a forward position. That's why it's in this graph. The E is out here. E. And for the I sound, as in bit, it's a shorter sound, I, and it's lower than E. So it's not E, it's I. And if you say so we practice a little bit until my students become aware of the difference. Being aware that there is a difference, or this is an English sound, this is an English sound, this is an English sound, this is the in book, or oo in food and book. rounding your lips or not rounding lips. So becoming aware of the sounds, the possible sounds in a language, does not mean, it doesn't guarantee that you immediately will be able to produce these sounds, but you become aware of these sounds. You know that there are differences in these sounds. Believe it or not, one good source for your target language, let's say you're learning French, and say, well, you know, what are the sounds of French? Go to Wikipedia. So go to Wikipedia, search French language, search any language. If you're learning Arabic, Portuguese, Spanish, whatever, and somewhere on that page, they're gonna talk about the phonology of the language. So in the vowels in French, you have the E, like as in English. Then you have a rounded sound, that U. A lot of people have U is also in German. I remember when I learned German, a lot of people got really confused, like E and U. They couldn't round their lips to say U. They thought it was a U. So they made all sorts of weird sounds. But then when you realize that U is actually the same sound as an E, so if you say E, but you round your lips, so E, U, E, U, you go, oh, I already know how to say E, I just need to round my lips. So you start becoming aware of the sounds, the possible sounds in your target language. And then, of course, you need to practice a lot. And as I said, just because you become aware, it doesn't mean that you're automatically going to be able to produce these sounds. You need to practice. But I think awareness is the first step. And maybe Mary will add to it or tell me that this is all wrong. I don't know what I'm talking about. Ana Claudia, welcome. Good to see you again, Ana Claudia. This first time, Fernando says, first time here, but I follow your videos on YouTube. You're great. Oh, you are great, Fernando. Thank you so much. It's always nice to have your ego boosted a little bit. Thanks, Fernando. So the question here is, would you be interested, and I'll be asking you again in the future, would you be interested in a future live stream about the IPA, or the International Phonetic Alphabet, so you learn these, these different sounds, and learn how to read that table where you have all the different vowels, and or in perhaps do a live stream and videos, or only videos about the IPA. If you have any interest, just let me know. If you're watching this video in the future, just write a comment in the comment section, and I will see how much excitement I get from it. It's something I've been wanting to do, but I just want to make sure that people would be interested in it. Otherwise, you spend hours and hours and hours working on a video, and people are like, "Yeah, whatever. I don't care." I think it would be kind of cool. All right, I'm going to do a quick poll for Mary, for when Mary comes in. What is your target language? Mary would like to know what your target language is for everybody in the room. So while I'm talking here, and then when Mary comes on, I'd like to be able to tell her, people are learning English, French, German, or whatever. Brad says, you talked for 8 minutes without teaching anything. Oh, Brad, you were not paying attention. I just taught about phonetic awareness, talked about rounding, rounded sounds and unrounded sounds. So if you're learning a language, use that information to your benefit. Take notes. It helps to take notes. Maybe you're expecting me to, wave a magic wand and you're going to have all the knowledge. That's not going to happen. That's not how education works. Okay, the second tip that I have is, I want you, before I say what it is, I want you to think, why do people speak your native language with an accent? So whatever your native language is, I know Sylvia is from Italy. So Sylvia, when someone's speaking Italian, let's say an American speaking Italian, why do they have an accent? Or if you speak Spanish and you hear someone from France speaking, a French speaker speaking your language, why do they have an accent? Right? Well, there's interference from the first language. They're used to producing their language in a certain way. There's a music to the language. You have different sounds, the way you use your mouth and the sounds that you produce. So when you speak a second language, there's a tendency, especially if you start learning your second language when you're older, there's a tendency for you to bring those sounds, bring those speech habits into your second language. Okay, now you can use that to your benefit. So what I want you to think about is let's say you're learning English as a second language. Okay, so Ellison is from Brazil. So Ellison, imagine an American with the thickest possible accent, like that American that speaks really, really, really strong American accent. Okay, or Sylvia from Italy. So imagine an American speaking Italian with a really, really thick accent. Not just the accent, but the whole, music. Sometimes it's hard to tell if they're speaking English or Italian or Portuguese or what. Well, they're doing that because that's what American English sounds like. Okay, they're just bringing the whole inventory of sounds and music from English into your native language. Now, if you want to improve your English accent, if you're learning English and you want to improve your accent, mimic that person, okay? Pay attention to the music, okay? Instead of going, oh, you're so funny, you can't speak my language well. Don't be silly, right? We're all adults here. Maybe they can't help it. They're doing their very best. But you can use that to your advantage by paying attention to that music, to the sounds, those speech habits. And that's what you have to bring into English when you speak English as a second language. Okay? It doesn't always work. Some students, when I tell them to do that, they look at me like, I have no idea what you're talking about. But it does help some people. So Fernando says, Fernando says, absolutely, I'm a Spanish speaker and my target language is English. And there are a lot of aspects of my mother tongue that interfere with L2. That's right. But use what other people are doing in Spanish to, listen to how English speakers speak Spanish and use that to your advantage. Let's see, Ellison is learning English. Sylvia is learning English. Fernando is learning English. Roxana is learning English. Brad is not talking anymore. Okay. All right, just a disclaimer here. I don't want you to get the wrong idea. Pronunciation is not just individual sounds. So when I was showing you the vowels and you also look at the consonants, pronunciation is not just about getting those sounds, the vowels and the consonants, and putting them together to create words. Okay? Pronunciation goes from those discrete sounds in the language to what's called suprasegmental features. Suprasegmental features are features of the language. They don't really have to do with the pronunciation of the word or even the words themselves, but it's what else happens around the language when you produce an utterance. Okay, so if you get a simple sentence like I'm hungry, okay, just these sounds, I'm hungry, well, you can say I'm hungry, I'm hungry, I'm hungry. Okay, so just using different lengthening some words, like I'm hungry, you're lengthening those vowels, you're stressing different words. It can change the meaning of the utterance as a whole. So it's not just getting, I know all the sounds in English, I'm done. Okay, Ellison saying yes, there's intonation. Okay, that's that song that that you have to learn when you learn a second language. Well, you don't have to, but it's part of learning the language. So in case anybody is just walking in our speaker asked me to ask you guys before she comes on, what is your target language? What language are you here for? Okay. They have a, I think most people so far are learning English. They have English, 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 English. Anna Claudia is learning English too. Roxanne is learning English. So far, we don't have anybody learning other languages. Oops, sorry. Okay, once again, thank you so much for our members. These are the members we have so far. Roxana's actually here. Some of these people are just great people because they're just members, but they're not really necessarily interested in the perks. They just want to help out. They believe in the work that I do, and that's awesome. And just as a reminder, next week, next Saturday, we have another session. Will be number 7, how to improve your speaking skills. Okay, this is gonna be going on for a few weeks still. And finally, let's welcome Mary to Snap Language. She'll talk about improving your pronunciation, all the way from producing discrete sounds to everything else. Okay. All right, Mary, welcome.
Hi, Mark. Good to see you. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you for showing up. I mean, you're such a trooper.
That's a pretty low bar.
It's Saturday. I mean, you could be doing, working in your garden.
Yeah.
Taking care of your tomatoes.
It's hot outside, so in the air conditioning, it's good.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate it. You were listening, right, to the poll. So I think most people, so far, all the answers are English, 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 English. We've had, in previous live streams, we had people learning Arabic. We had people learning German, French, and I think some of the people here are not just learning English; they already speak other languages. So they've had some experience with, language learning. And because they're here, they understand English well enough to be here, so they're fairly advanced. Okay, so I wouldn't make that assumption necessarily, but that's where we are.
Yeah, that's great. And the things that we'll talk about are really applicable to every language, if you're learning any language at all. But I'll talk a little bit more specifically with examples from English, since that seems to be the interest in this particular group.
Yeah, and if Mary says something about English, if she's using examples from English, and you go, wait a minute, does that apply to the language that I'm interested in? Just ask a question in the chat, okay, and I'll pass it on to Mary. I can actually show Mary the chat. She can even read the questions for herself. Okay?
Great.
All right, Mary, just first to get started, could you give us a little background on, why are you here? What makes you an expert in pronunciation? What's your background?
Why am I here? Well, because you asked me. But I do have an interest in and a background in this. I have taught ESOL, English for Speakers of Other Languages, for over 20 years now, I guess. And pronunciation was one of the classes that I taught. I also have given private lessons in it. It's a lot of fun to teach and to think about. And so, I'm happy to offer a few suggestions and hope that they'll be useful.
Okay, the other question I have is why do you even have a course in pronunciation? What's the need for a course in pronunciation?
So it really depends on the particular student, right? And what the student comes in looking for. We used to talk about this as accent reduction, and that's no longer the preferred term because everybody has an accent, and whatever language that you speak, the way that you speak it is an accent. So when we talk about, well, what do you mean by reducing your accent? In one sense, it doesn't make a lot of sense, the term itself. And also, it's really talking about what is considered a desirable accent, right? And one of the things that, as the field has advanced and as we've become more conscious of how language is used, the more that we've recognized that um, the language and the way that we use language is really contextual. So it matters why you're learning a language, where you want to use that language, who you want to use that language with. And so it's not a matter of reducing an accent, but making sure that how you want to communicate is possible. So, why do we offer classes in pronunciation or clarity of pronunciation? It's because if you're speaking and nobody can understand you, that's not really the purpose of having knowledge of a language or using a language. So the whole emphasis today is on are you able to do what you want with the language that you're learning, right? And a lot of students come into the classes because they're self-conscious. Maybe they're perfectly fine communicating, but they feel self-conscious about it. And one of the comments that we hear a lot is people saying, well, I say something and then they say, what did you say? And they feel like it's them. But actually, if you think about it, even in your native language or your mother tongue, when you say something, if somebody isn't paying attention or maybe they just don't understand something that you said, maybe you mispronounced a word, they're going to be asking you the same thing. So one of the reasons that people take the class is because of their own, self-consciousness about learning a language. Sometimes people come from a language background where they have sound how can we say it? The language that they speak is very far from English, and so they really do have multiple issues with communicating. And then we can work on various aspects of what we call communicative competence. In other words, your ability to say and be understood and to participate in a conversation. And that's really what we focus on. But, it really depends on who you are, what you're learning the language for, and where you plan on speaking it.
Yeah, because in a sense, I think native speakers could benefit from some kind of training depending on what they do, right? So if I work on the phone a lot, I need to talk to customers. There's a certain societal expectation that you should speak a certain way. So people would take it wouldn't be a pronunciation course necessarily, but training to communicate, to how to sound polite and things like that. But even that, some people kind of balk at because there are so many dialectal differences in the world that can cause some miscommunication, right? So how do you balance that?
Well, and the fact is that there are people who will teach speakers to change their accent or to actually adopt another accent on top of whatever the accent that they speak with is. Okay. So, in every country or in every language, there are certain accents that are considered preferable by a broader group of people. And so, for example, in the United States, we have many, many different accents, but the Southern accent or the Texas accent, which is one variation of the Southern accent, these outside of the South or outside of Texas, these accents are not always as acceptable as, say, a Midwestern accent. So I know somebody who is a national speaker, and she was very self-conscious. Again, this is how she felt, very self-conscious of her Southern accent, and went to a speech trainer who coached her so that she lost some of that accent when she was doing, or giving a speech in a broader or to a broader audience. But then when she's home in the South with her family, she speaks with her Southern accent. And, no matter what accent you have, it's going to be acceptable within your group because an accent is really a lot about who you are as a person, right? So, if you speak Spanish or Italian or, any language, Japanese, Chinese, whatever your language is, when you speak with the people, speak English, with the people who have that same linguistic background, you understand each other perfectly, and your accent is part of your being a member of that group, right?
Exactly.
The
Yeah.
question comes when you cross boundaries and go to a different group. And that's why I think it's really important to identify, what is it that you're trying to do? Why do you want to change your accent, or maybe think of it as adopting another accent on top of what you already do so that you can switch accents depending on the situation. Just like you use different vocabulary in any language depending on who you're talking to, different grammatical structures, maybe even intonation. I always tell my students, if you're talking to your grandmother or you're talking to your doctor, do you speak in exactly the same way that you talk to your child or your best friend? And the answer is no, right? And so it's the same thing. So I would encourage everybody to think about their purposes, but also to think about not changing your accent, but maybe adopting different accents if that's what you want to do. If you think it will be helpful to you in your personal communications or your professional life.
So, if I'm hearing it right, so there's a lot of like a psychological component to it, right? So before you even start working on someone's accent to improve someone's accent, you'd have to look into, what motivates you to be here, to want to change your accent to start with.
Exactly. So, for example, I had a student who was from India, and he was a health professional. And he was finding that in his work situation, his patients couldn't understand everything that he was saying. So, in his context, it was really important for him to be able to speak in a manner that his patients could understand. We're talking about people's health here, and they could understand what he was saying when he asked them questions, when he gave them instructions on medication or other things. So that would be an example of someone coming from a language where the sounds are very, very different from English. And it was interesting because he did make a lot of improvement, but it was never his goal to lose that accent completely, just to be able to communicate better. So, that would be an example of somebody who had a professional reason. And again, it came down to communicative skills rather than to, wanting to lose who he was or who that part of himself was.
Related to that, can you address right quick something that keeps coming up? I want to sound just like a native speaker.
Okay, so we've had this conversation several times, right, Mark?
No, not for me, for them, for the audience.
I know, but I want to bring this in because I'm going to tell the group that I actually disagree with you. Because your line, I think, you correct me if I'm wrong, but your line is that, yeah, but it's pretty impossible, right? It's not a good goal to have because it's so hard and very few people make it, right? And you might get discouraged and quit.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So
I mean, I think it's okay to have that goal, but you just have to be realistic about it. So if you say, I want to sound just like a native speaker after, learning English for a year, and then you start getting discouraged because after a whole year, I still sound like, I have an accent. Like, okay, wait a minute, be real about this. It's okay to have that goal, but think it through. Maybe you can take short steps to get closer and closer and closer to that. And again, it goes back to why. Why is it so important to sound like a native speaker?
Well, sure. So, gosh, there's several different ways to address that question. And I guess the first thing to say is that, if this is your goal, I think it's a fine goal. I would ask you, what do you mean by a native speaker? Because a native speaker in the US is obviously very different from a native speaker in the UK or Australia or New Zealand or, even Canada. I mean, there are differences. And then within the United States, just as an example, because I know it best, there are so many different accents, right? So, what do you mean by a native speaker? That's the first thing. And in the UK also, because we all know that there are people who say the only real English is RP, received pronunciation English from the UK. But if you go to the UK, I mean, the UK is rich in different accents, and in some ways, it can be difficult to understand some of those accents, even though the people are speaking English. And I know sometimes because I watch a lot of British TV, sometimes I watch a program where people are speaking with a strong regional or local accent, and I have to watch it twice. I get the main gist of it, but there are these nuances that I don't get, right? So that's one thing. What do you mean by native speaker? But the other thing I would say is, yeah, that's great, and because I'm an optimist, and I know people who have learned a language as an adult, and they've been able to do it. But it's a long term proposition. I think of it kind of like being a pro athlete or like going to the Olympics or something like that. Yeah, it's possible, but number one, are you committed? How committed are you? How important is this? How much time are you going to spend on this endeavor? And secondly, how talented are you? Because we all know that language, as with everything else, some people, this is something that comes easily to them, and other people struggle more with it. And it's not good or bad. It's just that the way that our brains are wired as humans, once we reach, say puberty, the time when learning an accent naturally just by absorption has passed for most people. So, yeah, possible. I think it's great, but keep in mind that it is something that's long term, and you have to be very deliberate about it and spend a lot of time.
Yeah,
doing it.
you hit all the points that I keep going back to. That number one, what do you mean by that? Okay. There has to be some level of commitment. Okay, but also it's a long-term commitment. You can't expect. Okay, my main issue is that I believe that people are buying into marketing. Okay, if you buy my course, come to Snap Language, pay me, $200 a month, and you'll speak like a native speaker in a year. They know it's not going to happen, or it may happen to a few people. They're just using native speaker as a selling point. Or in our courses, we have, native speaker teachers, and you will, be exposed to native speaking materials, and you will speak like a native speaker. So native speaker becomes a buzzword to, get into people's pockets. And I think it's very dishonest. People end up buying into it to no fault of their own. And I think what you said is just great. Yeah, it's possible. It doesn't happen quickly. You have to be committed to it. And I would add, you have to understand why. Okay, why is that so important to you? Okay, what's
Yeah.
going on there? But if you can answer all the questions in a positive way, I'm aware of it. I know it's difficult. I want to do it. I'm ready for some disappointments along the way. Hey, I'll be there to help you. I won't get in your way. I just hate the marketing ploys, around sounding like a native.
So, well, we live in a world where marketing is important for a lot of people, right?
No kidding.
So I think it's important just to be aware of it. And a little bit later, when I talk about resources, I want to give a shout out to teachers who are not native speakers of a language, and there's a particular reason for that. But just being a native speaker is not a good enough credential or qualification to be a really good teacher. Let's
Yeah,
put it that way.
yeah,
I agree with you there.
yeah. Um, okay, so let's talk about how. What do you do since you're such a believer that it is possible and all that? So how do you go about it? So
Well, so I've reduced the entire semester course that I teach into a few points. And just to, give you some examples, right? And things that will get you started. Definitely not like the end game, but just some things to think about. So the first thing I would say is it's really important and helpful to identify the differences between your target language, which for most of you is English, and your first language or languages or your mother tongues, um, because those differences really go deeply into the communicative, the difficulties we have with communication, right? And that actually occurs at a number of different levels. The first level, I guess, and the one that most people think about, which Mark was talking about earlier, with the IPA, has to do with the phonemes, the individual sounds in a language, right? And, depending on the language that you're coming from and the language that you're learning, some sounds are easy because they convert, but other sounds, they don't exist in your language. So, for example, my first language was actually Japanese. And in Japanese, there is no the R sound, like there is in English. I actually had to go to speech therapy because I couldn't make that sound. I was in second grade and I was still making something between a L and a D, which is and the thing about it is I couldn't even hear that there was a difference, okay, because I wasn't exposed that much to English, when I was at home. Um, so it was a matter of learning how to hear it, and then also learning how my mouth had to work in order to make that sound. Um, so identifying those sounds that are difficult, right? Because they don't exist. But it can also go the other way. Okay, so this is kind of a funny story, but I remember one student, I can't remember what language, it was a South Asian language that he spoke, and he was learning English, obviously. And we were talking about the sound for H. So this is in a group setting. And, so we made the sound for H, and then everybody was working on it and, could make the sound for H. And then, but he kept asking me, he said, so is it, or is it, and I said, yes, it's, and he said, no, 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 no. Is it, or is it, and we went around several times on this. And finally it occurred to me, and I said, are you making different sounds? And he said, yes, in my language is different from, and I'm like, sounds the same to me. Yeah, it is. So, even recognizing that sometimes in your language you make different sounds,
Yeah.
that in English there's only one that's kind of similar. Okay, the point being that there is no one perfect sound in any language. There's a saying, the difference that makes a difference. So in different languages, the cutoff between one sound and another sound is going to be different. And if you're kind of in the ballpark, the in the right range that doesn't spill over to another sound, you're doing well. Also,
So you're trying
you
to
need to recognize,
approximate to get as close to that sound as possible.
right,
Approximate that production.
right. And also recognize again, even in one language, there are going to be variations depending, right? So I did my undergraduate work at university in Texas, and somebody once asked me, "Is this your pin?" And I looked at this thing and I'm like, "Pin? That's a pen," but because of the accent, and I don't know if you can hear it because, again, depending on your language, you may or may not. There's a difference between pin, P-I-N, and pen, P-E-N, but in some accents, there's not. So recognize that there's variation. Okay. Um, so that's the phonetics. That's the most basic level, I guess. And you need to be kind of in the right range for a lot of things. But there are a couple of other things I wanted to talk about, which have to do with the suprasegmentals, the parts that are bigger than the individual sounds. And these actually go really, really deep into your own language. Okay, so we know that before a baby is born, that baby is listening to sound. So kind of think like if you're swimming, and you put your head under the water, you can kind of hear these sounds. They don't sound anything like, when your head is out of the water, right? But so when babies are in utero before they're born, they're listening to and learning and internalizing things like rhythm and stress and intonation in the language that surrounds them. Okay. Of course, it doesn't have any meaning, but those things you carry with you. And so when Mark was talking about, think about how an American sounds, when they speak your language, that's because that rhythm and intonation is deeply held within your brain. It's been there for however long you've been alive, really. So, talking about the language that you're coming from and the language that you're going to, thinking about rhythm, for example, rhythm and stress, and they kind of work together. So rhythm, like when you listen to music and you can clap like this, okay, that's the beat of the language. And about 90% of the languages in the world are what's called syllable timed languages. In other words, every syllable is like, a steady beat. The more syllables that you add to, your sentence or your phrase, the longer it takes to say. Okay. English is one of the other types of languages. It's called a stress timed language, which means the number of syllables is less important than how many stressed syllables that you have. So I'm going to just give you a quick example of how that works in English. Okay, so let's say we start with a sentence, dogs chase cats, right? That's 3 syllables, dogs, chase, and cats, okay? Now I'm going to say this sentence, but I'm going to add some syllables in that change the grammar a little bit. So we have dogs chase cats, The dogs chase cats. The dogs chase the cats. The dogs will chase the cats. The dogs will have chased the cats. Okay. The first sentence, 3 syllables, dogs chase cats, takes the same amount of time to say as the last sentence, which is, I think it's 7. The dogs will have chased the cats. So 7 syllables, right? If you are coming from a language that is syllable timed, where every syllable takes longer to say, you will say, the dogs will have chased the cats. And it takes a lot longer. But for a speaker of English who's used to hearing the dogs will have chased the cats, where the dogs chase and cats are the long stressed syllables, that's mainly what you hear. The other things are there for grammar. You know, it's really hard to understand if you say everything the same way. Okay. So how do you get around that if you're trying to learn English or a different language? So one thing is to learn to listen for the stresses, you know, and to clap to them. So, for example, if I say my name is Mary, right? I have 2 claps, 2 stresses, name and me of Mary, right? So my name is Mary. So you listen to somebody that, you know, speaks in a way that you want to speak, and you clap to whatever they're saying. And then you try to repeat that, matching it with the claps. It's kind of funny, even with something that is as short as my name is something, if you speak a syllable time language, the first time you're going to be probably want to say my name is something, you know, like that. So clapping can help with that. Okay. And then the next thing I want to address is intonation, because intonation, that's how your voice goes up and down, also differs, you know, from language to language, right? And a lot of times when we're learning a new language, we're so focused on getting those sounds right that we forget how our voice goes up and down. And intonation is related to stress. So in English, if you have a stressed syllable, your voice is going to go up. It's going to be higher than an unstressed syllable. You know, so like the dogs, right? The dogs, you know, your voice goes up for dogs. Okay. So here's a suggestion that you can use in any language to try to get that intonation that's deeply ingrained in your brain to move towards an intonation, you know, that you want to use. And so let's say you're listening to a podcast or, you know, radio or something. It's easier if you don't have video because we tend to be visual as creatures when we get stuck on what's going on. So if you just do something where it's only audio and you listen and then you hum. So again, because it's easy, like my name is, right? My name is, you know, you just learn to hum that intonation along with the people who are speaking. And it helps if you do this. Let's say it's something that you can listen to, pause, hum a segment, and then go back and listen to it again, which luckily now, because we have so much technology. So that's an idea to help with your intonation. Okay.
I'm calling that shadow humming.
Shadow humming. So, and these are kind of fun, you know, the clapping thing and the humming thing.
Yeah, I love the humming
really
part because by humming, you're taking away the difficulty of having to produce all the sounds in
That's
words.
right.
You're just focusing on the stress.
That's right. That's right.
Anybody can hum in any language, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And, you know, one thing to note is you can't do all of these things at one time. Okay. So you can say, I have trouble making the, E sound. So then you practice the E sound. Fine. That's one thing. And then, when you want to practice rhythm and clapping, you do that separately. You don't try to do everything at once because your brain can't process all of it. When you're trying to learn a new skill, you need to separate those out. Okay, second big thing. The first one was, identify the differences, and I tried to give you some ideas on how you can approach those differences. The second thing is, and it's related, but learn to really listen. And I don't know about the people in this group, but in most cases, when people are learning a language, we tend to learn the language in school and we use written materials, right? So written materials are great because we all need to learn, to read and write and everything else. But the boundaries between words are different when they're written than when they're spoken. Okay, and one thing that makes it difficult for somebody to understand what somebody from a different language is saying is because those boundaries tend to be spoken as though they're on the page. So again, because this is the simplest example and everybody knows it, let's take my name is. 3 words, right? My name is. On a page, they're separated into 3 different words, and each word has a space between it. But when we say it, we don't say my name is. We say my name. I'm sorry, let me start over. My name is. My name is. See, if you think about it too much and it's your own language, then you get lost in it. So actually, it's almost like just 2 words. My name, right? Da-da, that's like a rhythm thing. It's like almost like one word with 2 syllables. My name, Ms. That M sound from name actually migrates, it transfers over to that is. And there are lots of materials on when this occurs in English, and you can find it for any language, right? So learn to listen to how people actually speak and, forget about the words on the page. Okay, that's another suggestion. And related to that, in every language, there are phrases that are used consistently, and so you can make huge strides in how you want to sound by memorizing how to say those few phrases. So of course, my mind goes blank and I can't think of anything right now. But let's say it's like, okay, so, which is something a lot of people say uh, in terms of continuing a conversation. So just learn, okay, so, and then whatever comes after that, you'll have mastered that particular phrase. Or expressions of, how are you doing? Don't learn it as separate words with different pronunciation, but how are you doing? How's it going? Just groups of words, phrases that you use all the time. So identify those and work on that. That'll really help a lot.
What do you think, like doing things like for fluency too, instead of saying, what did you do yesterday? So to focus on what did you
Yeah.
do? What did you see? What did you, I don't know, what did you eat? What did you see? What did you, or
Yes.
where
Yes.
did you go? Where did you swim? Where did you, and then you keep adding
Exactly.
words to
That's
it.
right.
I did that learning German because I had a really hard time like putting a whole sentence together. So it has to do with fluency as well, but I think it had to do with pronunciation, being able to enunciate a sentence, quickly
Mhm.
enough. So I started breaking it down into segments, and then I would make it longer and longer and longer until I couldn't stand that sentence anymore, and then I pick another one, And then when I noticed that when I know I practice a lot, and then when I was like actually talking to people, and that came up, and it just flowed, it just came out of my mouth. It felt so good, it's
Yeah,
like
and
yes.
also to recognize that a lot of this transfers, right? So if you practice with just one particular phrase, there are other phrases that are similar, and those will come out much more smoothly
Yeah,
also.
yeah.
So it's not like you're limited to the words or that particular phrase that you're using. And one more thing that's related to this is to notice where there are pauses, because um, sometimes I've had students who they would get going and they would just talk until they ran out of air with no spaces between anything. So as you listen, like I said, improve your listening. As you listen, think about what groups of words go together. Where do people stop, to take a breath or just to take a little pause, right?
Hmm.
And notice those things and put them together yourself as you're
Yeah.
practicing. So that I think can be helpful.
Like what you
And
just said, what you
I
just
know we're
said right
going to,
now, you said, where do people stop to take a breath? Where do people
yeah,
stop
exactly.
to take a breath? So you did stop there.
Exactly. And one good thing about this is that it tends to be related to grammatical units.
Yeah.
So, it's not like totally random. If, like a prepositional phrase will almost always go together,
Hmm.
right? Subjects will almost always go together, so knowing your grammatical units can be helpful. Okay, last thing, because I know that we're going on an hour here, has to do with making use of your resources. So I've already said, we're so lucky because today we have so much technology that's available to us. So whatever language you're trying to learn, you can actually listen to it in a natural context. I mean, when I was trying to learn French, we didn't even have a language lab.
Yeah.
All we had was a teacher, a teacher who stood at the front of the class and said something, and then we repeated. This was kind of the extent of my language learning. But today we do have all of these videos, audio, lots of media, and also technology that you can use. So here's an idea that I found very useful when I was trying to improve my pronunciation of French and Spanish. This was later when I had it available. Okay, so one thing is take an example of the speech that you want to emulate or to copy, listen to it, record yourself, and then listen to the two things back to back, right? See how close that you are. You can also, if you're technologically inclined, you can convert the speech to sound waves to see how they can, match up. It's not like 100%, but you can see if you're really different, you can see
Yeah.
where those differences are. And that gives you a visual way, if your ear especially isn't that trained to it, a visual way to compare your speech with, whatever you're using. And use real speech. I mean, a lot of times the textbooks have recorded conversations and they're really fake. I
They
mean,
sound
it may
just
be
like
easy to
native
understand, but
speakers.
you don't
They
want to
sound
sound like
just like native speakers.
so so go to like a podcast or some kind of audio. Oh, but do be careful. Okay, do be careful about what sample that you choose. And I can tell you this because sometimes people choose like performers who use a lot of words that you probably don't want to use if you're trying to speak a language at work, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So again, what is your purpose in learning the language? And find examples,
Yeah.
that would suit that purpose. Okay. And
Somebody made a comment
yeah,
earlier. I think that's what you were saying. Say, Perk said, "Do you see a place for recording yourself to analyze, compare, or is that overkill? I guess that you without knowing, you were answering Perk's question.
Oh yeah, so definitely. I don't think it's overkill. I mean, it depends on again, everything is individualized, right? So for some people, this may be something they're not interested in doing. But if you think it will help you, give it a try. It can be helpful to a lot of people. A final thing that I want to talk about just has to do with speakers or teachers who are non-native speakers of the language. So one of the things, and this is true everywhere. So, where I am, people say, oh, I want to learn, Russian from so and so because that person is a native speaker, you know, um, of Russian, I mean, and whatever the language is, there's a tendency to want to learn from somebody who grew up speaking a particular language. And there are things that native speakers do naturally that others don't, right? And we all know that. But we have to put everything into context. So, first of all, a native speaker is not necessarily a teacher. They may know the latest expressions, but they may not know anything about how you can learn it. So native speakers are great conversation partners, and some of them are trained to be teachers of that language. And then they have more background information, and that's great. But I do want to put in a word for people who, like you, are learning the language that they're teaching. And if you come from the same linguistic background, those people have a deep knowledge of what it means to be a student in that language. And they can point out to you, this is where we have difficulty. This is what you need to sound like. This is what we sound like in, I don't know, in whatever language, right? And then, but in the target language, we have to change what we're doing here. So every kind of person who speaks your target language can be a resource, but we need to realize what each offers, right? What each can contribute. So, don't feel like somebody just because they learn the language like you're learning the language doesn't have a lot to offer. Sometimes they can offer the most support for some of the issues that you're having trouble with. They can explain it in a way that makes sense to you, given, your language that you're starting with.
Yeah, of course. No, if I were looking for a teacher of a certain language, and I found someone who knew just as much as I did, we'd be partners, study partners, but not
Right.
teacher student. I think something that I've been trying to do with these live streams is to give people the tools for them to make decisions for themselves. To educate themselves, to know, how do I do this? How do I do that? Do I need to sound like a native speaker? Do I need a native speaking teacher? Like you were saying, should you record yourself to improve your pronunciation? Well, try it. If it works for you, it works for you. If it doesn't work for you, if you think it's, a waste of time, stop doing it. So I think we're very much in keeping with the whole my whole philosophy here.
I'm
That
glad I didn't contradict you.
Yeah, no, thank God.
Get you over the
Yeah.
line.
Thankfully, I was just so afraid. It's been great. Let me just give people a chance. I was trying to keep an eye on the chat, but I didn't want to be rude and not look at you. If anybody has a burning question, this is the time to do it. Because we're about to say goodbye. There was one comment that I wanted to highlight. It goes by so quickly sometimes.
And maybe they could type it again. If we haven't answered a question, if you could type it in
Yeah,
again.
if there's anything that hasn't been answered, you have a couple of minutes to write your question in. Oh, I think it was Burke that made it, or maybe Fernando who said that. Yeah, it was Burke. It says this is the only. It's like in the middle of the screen. It says this is the only language learning channel where I find myself actually taking notes. This is so good. Oh, thank you so much, Burke. You just made my day. And it's also a testament to Mary, that you were able to be captivating enough and have enough good information that people felt the need to take notes so they wouldn't miss anything.
Back in class on Saturday.
I know. Thank
That's
you
a lot
so
of fun.
much. And Perk is corroborating. He said it was great. I took notes. Thank you so much to both of you. Thank you, Perk. Thank you for being there. Let's see, Fernando says, as a non-native speaker of English, I'm proud of being able to teach the language because, oh, so you're a language teacher. Good for you. Because I feel a step ahead from natives because, as Mary said, I feel I have the tools to explain clearly. Absolutely. Sometimes, people say, oh, the good thing about, having a native speaker as a teacher is because they have a feel for the language, whatever that means. But a lot of times, for example, like if you say the expression like somewhat, someone was somewhat irritated. What does somewhat mean? If you ask native speakers what somewhat means, there will be a lot of disagreement. For some people, it means this much. For some people, it means this much. What's another expression? That usually comes up. Anyhow, there are many things that you say as a native speaker that the meaning is not exact. So I can give you an explanation, say, oh, this is what this word means, but another native speaker might say, no, 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 it means this. Okay, so there may be disagreement. You have regional differences. People from different parts of the country may use even grammar slightly differently. So a native speaker, define what a native speaker is. What do you mean by the native speaker has that feel for the language? Moreover, someone who has a deep understanding of the language and who has taught the language, who has experience in explaining things to students in a way that makes sense to them, I think is a lot more valuable, regardless what their native language is, than someone that, oh, I was born speaking English, therefore what do you know? You just speak English. You can even explain things. You don't even know what a student needs. You may not even understand what a student may need to be able to come up with an explanation for something. So good for you, Fernando. Best of luck with your teaching. Katie, thank you for coming. Katie was quiet. All right, guys. So if you don't have any questions, I will let Mary go back to her vegetable garden. Go back to your
Flowers
Saturday.
today.
Mary, thank you so much. I had
Oh,
no doubt.
no, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I had a lot of fun. Thank you to everyone for being here and for your comments. And, good luck on your language journey.
Yeah, to all of us. And I had no doubt. That's why I thought about you, because I had no doubt that you'd just wow everybody. I always have something to learn from you. See, people get really talkative at the end. Thank you so much. Bye bye, Mary. Thank you, Fernando. Thank you, Roxana, Perk, Sylvia, Katie, Anna Claudia. If I'm missing anyone, I apologize. We had a really nice crowd. Once again, Mary, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Oh,
Don't forget
thank you. Thank
don't,
you all.
don't forget to tune in this coming Saturday. Not you, Mary. You're dismissed.
You hold me back.
Don't forget to tune in This coming Saturday for the next one, we'll be talking about speaking. And actually, a lot of things that Mary talked about will help you with your speaking as well. Language, you can't separate out all the skills. Everything kind of happens together. Even though, we're taking care of separate skills, even Mary was talking about fluency and things that you do to help your pronunciation, also helps your fluency, helps your listening, and so forth. All right. Again, Mary, thank you so much. And guys,
Thank you all.
thank you so much for being such a wonderful crowd. Bye, Ana Claudia. Bye, Perk.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Katie. Bye, everybody. Thank you. Thanks, Mary.
Bye.